Hi pen friends, this is Sarah again. Today I'm going to be showing you the 3 vintage fountain pens that I have in my collection, and then I will be telling you what I think are the advantages and disadvantages of having vintage fountain pens. So I'm going to start off with the first vintage fountain pen that I bought. I bought all of these on eBay, and this one is a Mabie Todd Swallow. So Mabie Todd is a company that started off in the United States and then moved to England. And this pen is made around 1930. And as you can maybe see, it's kind of a short pen. It's like 4¼ inches long. Maybe it would be called a lady's pen because usually they made smaller pens for ladies back then, and mine has had a trim ring added by the original owner with their initial on it. So if you find another pen like this, it won't have this gold ring on it. You'll find that a lot of vintage pens have this type of clip with the ball on it, and also a lot of vintage pens will have some darkening on the barrel because they have a sac inside to hold the ink, and when the sac would off gas within the barrel of the pen, it would oftentimes change the color of the material of the barrel of the pen. And you can see this pen is a lever filler. So what happens is when you lift this lever up and you put it in your ink, you put the nib of the pen in the ink and release the lever presses in the sac inside the barrel, and then it releases it, and so it squeezes the sac and releases it, and that sucks in the ink into that sac. So I do like to use this pen posted because otherwise it's a pretty short pen, and I find that it's comfortable that way. It's a thin pen, and it has a 14-karat gold nib. It's a number 2 nib, which is a small nib that you'll find a lot on vintage pens. It's got a heart-shaped breather hole, and this pen, it's got a semi-flexible nib, so you can get some nice line variation. So I would say it goes from like a fine to a broad by adding some pressure. So this is the Mabie Todd Swallow, and they also are maybe more well known for the Mabie Todd Swan pens that they made, which I think are a little bit of the more expensive pens. So this would be one of the lesser expensive pens. And so when I bought this pen, it lasted me for a little while, and I was told that the sac had been recently replaced, but it degraded really quickly, and I ended up having to have a new sac put in. When people who collect a lot of vintage pens often learn how to put a new sac in themselves, but you need some tools, I think, for that, and so I had somebody else do it for me, and it cost about $50 to have the sac replaced. I didn't really shop around. I don't know if that is a good price for getting it resacked or not, but also the bar here was really loose, and so I think that they fixed that up a bit also. So this pen does write really smoothly, and the feedback is similar to a modern nib. I didn't really know what to expect when I bought this pen. As with a lot of vintage pens, the nibs, they come in all different types, a lot more variety than modern pens that come in like extra fine, fine, medium, broad. Just the type of line that you can get with a vintage pen varies a lot. So when you're buying something online, you really it's hard to tell what you're going to get. So I would say that the variety of nibs in vintage pens are a benefit and can make it kind of hard to know what you're getting. Alright, so I'm going to move on to the next one. By the way, this type of material you see a lot, this pattern, and it's oftentimes called like pearl and black or cream and black. So originally, mine has developed sort of a green and brown color to it, but originally I think that would have been more of a cream color all the way through with the black modeling. Alright, so then the next vintage fountain pen that I bought was this one, and it's a Hoover Super 346. And I think one of the main reasons that I bought this pen was because it was made in Denmark, and my ancestors are from Denmark, and it was made in the 1940s, which is when my dad was born, so it's kind of sentimental to me. This pen, you can see it's faded a little bit where light has been affecting the material. It was more of a burgundy color originally, which you can see where the cap has covered part of the barrel. And it has this blind cap which covers the filling mechanism, which is a button fill. So you press the button down and release it, and it compresses and releases the sac inside the pen to fill the sac with ink. And this type of cap band is quite common in vintage pens, so sort of like a cutout pattern in the metal. So when I first got this pen, I wasn't really sure that I liked it. One reason was that I didn't feel like I could get a lot of ink in it, and I could use the pen for a few days and then it would dry up. Also, I found it really difficult to clean out the ink from the pen. So if I wanted to use different colored inks, it was difficult because the ink I had previously used would contaminate the next ink that I would put in it. But after a while I decided there was a really good use for this pen, which is using it to draw with. So I exclusively use black ink in this pen, and I use it to draw, so I don't have to worry about what color, or about colors getting muddied or anything. I always use the Noodler's ink X Feather, and the reason I use it to draw is that this pen makes the finest line of any of my pens, and it's also a little bit flexible, so I can get good line variation. And I'm actually just gonna, I put my Noodler's X Feather into a Waterman bottle because it's easier to fill it from this. And I'm gonna fill it now because it's empty, and you can kind of see how it goes when I fill it. So I put the nib down in there, press the button, release. Sometimes people say if you do that a few times, it helps. I am not really an expert at vintage pens, so I know there's people who are subscribed that would know better than me, but maybe I'm not getting a full fill in my pen because of something I'm doing, but all I can tell is that you just press the button and release it. That's about all that you could do with it. But I find that, you know, when I'm doing a drawing, I only need the pen to be filled for a day or two anyways. Okay. Oop, I got some ink on my finger there. Alright. So this one, you can see that it really has a lot of variation. So going from a extra fine to a broad, and doesn't always get this much ink on my fingers when I fillet usually. It has a nice grip section here, and it's for writing, I don't find that I enjoy it for writing that much because the really fine line, it's a tiny bit scratchy, as probably any really fine writing pen would be. You know, it's okay for writing, but I really prefer it for drawing. And so that's the one pen that I always use for drawing, and the one pen in my collection that I don't always keep inked. I just put ink in it when I want to draw. Okay, and this is a pen that I showed you in my last video. It's a pen made by the Wasp Pen Company Incorporated, and it's made in Iowa, USA. And it's called the Clipper, and the pattern of the material is called brown circuit board. My particular pen has a little burnt mark right here. So with a lot of vintage pens, you're going to have a little bit of brassing where the gold has worn off. You're going to have a few little condition problems usually, but I find that they're quite attractive. I like that vintage look. So this one is also a lever filler, and this one actually I think is my favorite vintage pen. It just, the feedback of it, it's a hard nib, but it's smooth and it's wet, and I like the little bit of line variation that happens because going across, the cross stroke is thinner than the downstroke. And it's hard to describe feedback, so I guess it's something that you just learn when you use the pen. This one also has that heart-shaped breather hole, and Wasp is like a cheaper pen made by Schaefer. So this one has a Schaefer Lifetime nib on it. All of these three are gold nibs. So if you're looking for a gold nib, sometimes you can get a really good deal on a vintage pen with a gold nib. So that's one good way to add a gold nib pen to your collection. But I just find this pen really attractive and fun to use. So what would I say are some advantages and disadvantages of having vintage pens? Well, if you enjoy this vintage look, you know, look at how beautiful these patterns are. There's some really interesting materials that vintage pens were made out of, and I think the best reason of all is to get variety in your nibs, because these days they really don't make that much different types of nibs, not as much as they used to make, and you can get a good price on it, although you know, it's best if you figure out how to fix them up yourself, because you can, sometimes it's hard to find a good price on a pen that's been restored, and sometimes you end up having to get some restoration work done on a pen. Also, it can be hard to know what the pen is going to write like unless you go to a pen show. So I'm in Massachusetts, and we have the Commonwealth Pen Show, and most of the pens being sold there are vintage pens. So if you can go to a show and try it out, I would say that's the best way to buy vintage pens. People who know how to restore them could buy them in bulk and get a good price and then just fix them up themselves. But if you're looking for the one pen that you really enjoy, it's probably best to try it out. I want to send a shout out to Pier Gustafson. He has a wonderful YouTube channel, and he specializes in vintage pens, and he also sells vintage pens. So if you're interested in vintage pens, check out his channel. Alright, I think that's all I have to say about these. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you later.